On a sunny morning in the small town of Stowe, Vermont, Emma Davis was tending to her garden when the phone rang. Answering quickly, she heard the frail and hesitant voice of her father, Arthur. "Emma, it's Dad," he began, his voice sounding weaker than she had ever heard. "Dad, what happened?" Emma asked, her heart racing. "I'm on my deathbed, dear," Arthur said with a heavy breath. "I have one last request." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. "What do you need me to do, Dad?" "I'm here. I need you to take your husband, John, to our cottage in Montpelier. He needs care, and I trust no one else to look after him." Emma was silent, surprised by the request. "But Dad, John. Is he all right? What happened?" Arthur paused before answering, his voice trembling. "He's sick, Emma. He needs constant care. And I need you to take care of the family business here in town for a year. I promise there will be a reward." "But why now? Why didn't you tell me before?" Emma asked, her voice filled with concern and confusion. "I didn't want to burden you," Arthur responded, almost whispering. "But now I have no choice. It's very important, Emma." Emma took a deep breath, looking at the horizon as she tried to process everything. "I don't know if I can do this. John and we have our own problems." "I know, my dear," Arthur said softly. "But trust me. There are more things at stake than you realize. Please do this for me." Emma felt a tear roll down her cheek. She knew her father would never ask something like this if it wasn't extremely important. "All right, Dad," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I'll do it. I'll take John to Montpelier and take care of the business here." "Thank you, my daughter," Arthur said, relieved. "You don't know how much this means to me." After hanging up, Emma stood for a moment, the phone still in her hand. She looked up at the blue sky and wondered how everything had changed so quickly. She knew she had a difficult journey ahead, but she was determined to do whatever it took to honor her father's request. With a heavy heart, Emma drove slowly along the winding roads leading to the countryside house in Montpelier. Beside her, John was reclined in the passenger seat, his face pale and his tired eyes reflecting the sunlight streaming through the car windows. The silence between them was broken only by the sound of the engine and the wind rustling through the trees. "We're almost there, John," Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The house is ready for you. The nurse will take care of everything." John nodded, the effort to speak seeming too great at that moment. "Thank you, Emma," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I know this isn't easy for you." She glanced at him quickly, tears threatening to fall. "We'll get through this, John. I promise I'll do everything I can to make sure you're okay." Arriving at the countryside house, Emma parked the car and quickly got out to help John. He tried to get out on his own, but his legs were too weak. "Let me help you," she said, gently holding him and guiding him inside. The nurse, a middle-aged woman with a welcoming smile, was already waiting at the door. "Hi, you must be Emma," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Susan. I'll be taking care of John while he's here." Emma shook Susan's hand, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. "Thank you, Susan. He needs a lot of attention. Please call me if you need anything." Susan smiled and motioned for them to come inside. "Let's get him to his room. He'll be comfortable here." Inside the house, Emma helped John settle into bed, arranging the pillows and blankets around him. He looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude and sadness. "I know this is hard, Emma, but you are the strongest person I know. I'll be okay." Emma held his hand, the tears finally falling. "I promise I'll be back in a year, John. Please take care of yourself." John squeezed her hand with the little strength he had. "I love you, Emma. I'll wait for you." She leaned in and kissed his forehead, feeling the warmth of his skin. "I love you too, John. More than anything." With one last look at him, Emma stepped back, trying to hold back the tears as she left the room. Susan walked her to the door, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "He'll be all right, Emma. I promise to take good care of him." Emma took a deep breath and nodded, trying to gather the strength to leave. "Thank you, Susan. I trust you." Emma wrote letters to John almost every night, telling him about her day, the challenges she faced, and how much she missed him. "Dear John," began one of her letters, "today was particularly tough, but I thought of you the whole time. Your strength inspires me to keep going." She kept the letters in a special box, waiting for the day she could give them to him in person. Knowing that Susan was taking good care of John gave her some peace, but his physical absence was a persistent pain. The hope that they would soon be together again kept her strong and determined. Emma's dedication to the business surprised everyone around her. With each challenge she overcame, she felt a step closer to honoring her father's request and reuniting with John. She knew the time apart was temporary and that, in the end, her dedication and sacrifice would be rewarded. 6 months had passed, and Emma was in her office reviewing documents when the phone rang. She answered quickly, recognizing the number from the country house in Montpelier. "Hello, this is Emma," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hi, Emma, it's Susan," the nurse's voice came through. "I have some news about John." Emma's heart raced. What happened? Is he okay? Susan hesitated before responding, the concern evident in her voice. "He's not doing well, Emma. In the past few weeks, his condition has worsened. He's very weak, and the medications don't seem to be helping anymore." Emma closed her eyes, feeling a wave of guilt and despair. "I knew this would be hard, but I didn't expect him to deteriorate so much. Does he say anything? Does he ask for me?" Susan took a deep breath before answering. "Yes, he asks for you every day. He's very down, and I think your absence is affecting him more than we anticipated." Emma felt tears forming in her eyes. "I want to go to him, Susan. I want to see John, but my father asked me to stay here for a year. I promised I would keep that promise." Susan's voice was gentle and understanding. "I understand, Emma. But sometimes, circumstances change. Maybe it's time to reconsider what's most important." Emma knew Susan was right, but the promise she made to her father weighed heavily on her heart. "I'll think about it, Susan. Please take good care of him and keep me informed." "Of course, Emma. I'll do everything I can to keep him comfortable," Susan said before hanging up. After the call, Emma sat in her chair, lost in thought. The image of John, weak and asking for her, lingered in her mind. Days passed, and each new update from Susan brought more disheartening news. One night, while reviewing papers in the kitchen, the phone rang again. It was Susan. "Emma, I'm sorry to bother you again, but John's condition has worsened even more. He had a high fever today and is very debilitated. I don't know how much longer he can hold on like this." Emma gripped the phone tightly, her voice trembling. "Oh my God, Susan. I don't know what to do. My father made me promise, but I can't let John suffer like this." Susan paused before responding. "Maybe your father would understand if he knew how John is now. Sometimes promises need to be broken for the greater good." After hanging up, Emma stayed up all night, torn between the promise she made to her father and the love she felt for John. The guilt and worry consumed her, and each new update from Montpelier made the weight on her heart grow heavier. She knew she had to make a difficult decision, and that time was running out. The next day, Clara noticed Emma's distressed expression. "Are you okay, Emma? You look worried." Emma sighed, feeling the weight of the recent news. "It's John. He's not doing well. Susan says his condition has worsened a lot." Clara placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Maybe it's time to reconsider. Your father always wanted the best for you both. I'm sure he wouldn't want to see John suffering." Emma nodded, grateful for Clara's support. "You're right. I need to think about what's most important now." Clara and Susan's words echoed in Emma's mind as she tried to find the best solution for the painful situation. Each passing day increased her anguish and the need to do something for John, even if it meant breaking the promise she made to her father. As time passed, Emma began to notice that something strange was happening with the family business. At first, they were just small details that went unnoticed amid the whirlwind of daily tasks. A document that seemed out of place, a transaction that didn't make sense, but she attributed it to fatigue and her own distraction. One morning, while reviewing the financial records, Emma noticed a series of transactions that seemed suspicious. Significant amounts were being transferred to accounts she didn't recognize. "This isn't right," she murmured to herself, frowning. Determined to understand what was happening, she began to investigate more deeply. She gathered all the relevant documents and spent nights analyzing every detail. The inconsistencies began to pile up. Contracts signed with non-existent companies, invoices that didn't add up, and a clear pattern of embezzlement. Emma knew she needed help to dig deeper. She called Clara, her father's trusted assistant, for a private conversation. "Clara, I need your help," Emma said, showing her the suspicious documents. "Something is very wrong here." Clara looked at the papers carefully. Worry reflected on her face. "Emma, this is very serious. We need to find out who's behind this." Together, they began tracking every suspicious transaction, looking for connections and clues. Emma started discreetly interviewing employees, trying not to raise suspicion. "Do you remember seeing anyone strange around here recently?" she asked one of the accountants. "Actually, now that you mention it," replied the accountant, thoughtful. "There was a new consultant who came a few months ago. I don't remember the name, but he seemed to have access to a lot of information." This lead led Emma to discover that the so-called consultant was actually an imposter. Using fake documents, he had infiltrated the company to siphon funds meticulously. Emma managed to trace an email he had let slip, revealing a direct connection to an offshore account. "We've got a name," Emma told Clara, showing her the email. "Richard Sloane. We need to find out everything we can about him. The investigation revealed that Richard Sloane was a professional con artist, with a history of frauds in several companies. Emma decided to confront him directly. She arranged a meeting at a local cafe, disguised as a casual encounter. "Mr. Sloane, thank you for coming," said Emma, trying to hide the tension in her voice. Richard smiled, unsuspecting. "Of course, Ms. Davis. How can I help?" Emma showed him some of the fraudulent documents. "Can you explain these transactions?" Richard's smile vanished. He tried to dodge, but Emma was relentless. "We know what you did, Richard. I have enough evidence to take this to the authorities." Richard turned pale, knowing he had been caught. "I can explain," he stammered, but Emma wasn't willing to hear excuses. "You'll have to explain to the police," she said, standing up. "Clara has already called the investigators. They're on their way." Back at the office, Emma felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. The battle was far from over, but she knew she was on the right path to clearing the family name and business. The trust her father had placed in her was her greatest motivation to keep going, resolving every problem with determination and courage. Emma discovered that someone was trying to embezzle money from the company. To her surprise, all the clues led to her father. Confused and hurt, she confronted Arthur, who, already very ill, couldn't adequately explain himself. Emma's suspicions began with the discovery of a series of bank transfers that didn't make sense. Significant amounts of money were disappearing from the company's accounts and being transferred to an unknown recipient. Growing more concerned, Emma decided to investigate further. One afternoon, while sifting through old documents in her father's office, she found a folder hidden in the back of a drawer. Inside, there were records of suspicious bank transactions and coded letters. "What is this?" she murmured to herself, feeling a chill run down her spine. Emma spent hours deciphering the letters and tracing the transfers. To her dismay, everything pointed to one person: her father, Arthur. "This can't be true," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. How could the man who taught her everything about integrity be involved in something like this? Determined to get answers, Emma went to her father's room, where he was bedridden and frail. She entered slowly, trying to contain the anger and sadness she felt. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. Arthur lifted his head with difficulty, his eyes cloudy as he tried to focus on his daughter. "Emma dear, what is it?" he asked weakly. Emma approached the bed, holding the folder of documents. "Dad, I found this in your office. There are suspicious transactions here, and everything points to you. I don't understand. Why?" Arthur looked at the documents and then at Emma, a look of sadness and exhaustion on his face. "Emma, I don't know what to say," he stammered, struggling to find the words. "It's more complicated than it seems." Emma felt her anger rising. "More complicated? Dad, this is embezzlement. How could you do this to our company, to our family?" Arthur closed his eyes, looking even older and more fragile. "I never wanted to hurt you, Emma. Things got out of control. I just wanted to protect you all." Emma took her father's hand, feeling the frailty of his bones under her skin. "Protect us how, Dad? By embezzling money? That doesn't make sense." Arthur took a deep breath, struggling to speak. "There were threats, Emma. Things you don't know about. I tried to handle it the best way I could. Please, understand that everything I did was to protect you and John." Emma looked at him, trying to process his words. "Threats? What kind of threats?" Arthur tried to sit up, but his weakness prevented him. "Dangerous men. Emma. They wanted money. I thought I could contain them, but I failed." Emma's tears began to fall. "Why didn't you tell me, Dad? We could have faced this together." Arthur squeezed Emma's hand with the little strength he had left. "I didn't want to involve you in this. I wanted you to live in peace, without these worries. Forgive me, Emma." She cried silently, the pain and confusion overwhelming her heart. "Dad, I love you, but this is too much to process. We need to find a solution." Arthur looked at her with sadness and love. "I know, my daughter. I know. I just wanted to protect you and John." Emma stayed by her father's bedside for a long time, feeling the depth of the situation. The answers she had been seeking were still unclear, but one thing was certain. The truth, no matter how painful, needed to be faced. She knew it was now her responsibility to save the company and somehow redeem her father's actions. Arthur passed away on a quiet spring morning, with sunlight gently filtering through the bedroom windows. Emma was by his side, holding his hand as he took his last breath. The void left by his departure was profound, and the pain was overwhelming. Emma felt a wave of disorientation. The world seemed to spin around her. A few days later, still struggling to process the loss, Emma received a summons to hear the reading of her father's will. Sitting in a conference room with the family lawyer, She listened to his words with a growing sense of perplexity. Arthur Davis's will, the lawyer began, was drafted with great care. According to his wishes, Emma, you are the sole heir to his share. Emma looked at the lawyer, her eyes still swollen from crying. What did he leave for me? The lawyer continued, reading the terms precisely. Arthur made it clear that you must go to Montpelier, where you will find further instructions regarding your inheritance. He also expressed the desire that you continue to take care of the family business and John. Emma frowned, trying to understand the connection. But why Montpelier? And what is so important there? The lawyer adjusted his glasses and shuffled some documents before responding. Arthur did not detail much in the will. He just made it clear that it is crucial for you to go there to receive what is rightfully yours. Emma felt confused and restless. I don't understand. My father was always a man of clear and direct actions. Why leave such a vague instruction? Sometimes, the lawyer said with a sympathetic look, a person's last wishes can have deeper meanings. Perhaps there is something in Montpelier that your father felt was important for you to discover on your own. Emma thought of John, who was in Montpelier under Susan's care. I promised I would be there for him, especially after my father's death. I can't leave John alone now. She stood up, a sense of determination beginning to form amidst her confusion. I will go to Montpelier. If my father left instructions there, I need to follow through. The lawyer nodded, acknowledging Emma's decision. I can prepare the necessary documentation for your trip. If you need any assistance in organizing your travel, I am at your service. Emma thanked him and left the office with a heavy heart. She was still struggling to understand the connection between Arthur's instructions and what she expected to find in Montpelier. However, the certainty that she needed to be with John and the desire to fulfill her father's request drove her to move forward. As she packed her bags and prepared for her trip, Emma felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. She knew she had a journey ahead of her and needed to face whatever awaited her in Montpelier. Each step she took towards this new journey was a step into the unknown, but also towards the hope of answers and the continuation of the promises made. Upon arriving in Montpelier, Emma was greeted by Nurse Susan at the entrance of the country house. Susan had a worried look on her face, and the warmth of her welcome couldn't hide the tension that hung in the air. Emma, it's good to see you, Susan said, trying to force a smile. I'll take you to John. Emma felt a lump in her throat and followed Susan through the hallways of the house, which seemed quiet and somewhat empty. The atmosphere was laden with a disquieting calm. When they entered John's room, Emma hesitated for a moment at the door, her heart pounding. John was lying in bed, covered by a light blanket. The image of him was a stark contrast to the vibrant man she remembered. He looked much paler and even more fragile. His eyes, once full of life, were now dull and tired. Susan spoke softly. John, your wife is here. John slowly lifted his head, his eyes meeting Emma's. He watched her with an expression Emma couldn't fully decipher. There was a strange glint in his eyes, something that seemed to mix surprise with an indescribable feeling. Emma felt a pang of concern as she noticed John's fixed and almost distant gaze. Emma, John murmured, his voice weak and raspy. You came. Emma approached the bed, gently holding John's hand. Yes, John, I'm here. How are you? Susan, how is he really? Susan looked at John with a sympathetic expression before responding. His condition has deteriorated. We've been doing our best to keep him comfortable, but he's very fragile. John made an effort to smile, but the gesture seemed painful. I missed you. Emma felt a wave of sadness at the effort John was making to speak. I missed you too, John. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. She tried to smile to encourage him, but John's expression unsettled her. He continued to look at her with that strange gaze, as if trying to remember something or understand her in a way he couldn't. Is something wrong? Emma asked, worried. You seem different. John slowly shook his head, his expression of confusion mixed with deep sadness. No, it's just that. I was waiting for you. Susan, sensing the growing tension, decided to intervene. Perhaps it's best to leave you two alone for a while. I'll be nearby if you need anything. Emma nodded, grateful for Susan's sensitivity. Thank you, Susan. Susan left the room, leaving Emma and John alone. Emma sat down in the chair beside the bed, holding John's hand and trying to offer some comfort. She looked at him, her heart full of worries. Something didn't seem right, but Emma knew she needed to be present and offer all the support she could. As she watched John, Emma couldn't help but think about what might be happening with him and what the true reason behind that enigmatic look was. She prepared herself to face not only John's physical frailty but also the unresolved issues that might be hidden behind his behavior. As Emma organized the country house, a small drawer in the office caught her attention. It was a drawer she hadn't thoroughly examined yet. Driven by curiosity and the need to better understand what her father might have left for her, she opened it carefully. Inside the drawer, among yellowed papers and disorganized folders, Emma found a folded letter with an old seal. The handwriting was familiar. It was her father Arthur's. Emma's heart raced. She knew the letter could contain important information, especially after everything that had happened. Sitting in one of the chairs in the room, Emma unfolded the letter with trembling hands. The smell of aged paper filled her nostrils as she began to read. The words, written with the same firmness and clarity Arthur always used, seemed to come alive as she progressed through the message. "My dear Emma," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it means I am no longer around and John is with you. I am sorry for not being clearer, but what I am about to reveal is crucial." Emma took a deep breath, her heart racing with every word. Arthur continued, "John is not just ill. I discovered something terrible involving him in an illegal scheme. The company was being used as a front for fraudulent transactions and tax evasion. John was caught up in this, perhaps unaware of the danger, but involved nonetheless." Arthur's words were like a slap in the face. Emma struggled to process what she was reading. John involved in an illegal scheme? She repeated softly to herself, shocked. Arthur went on, "I tried to handle the situation discreetly, but I realized I couldn't resolve it alone and without raising suspicions. That's why I asked you to stay away. For your own protection. Having someone close to him could compromise your safety. It's a complex and dangerous situation. If you were here while the investigations progressed, you could be targeted for retaliation or be at risk." Emma felt a wave of anguish reading her father's concern for her safety. She remembered Arthur's words in their last conversation. There was a chilling logic to his actions, but also a deep sense of betrayal. "My goal was to ensure that, while dealing with this situation, you were away from danger," the letter continued. "I hope you can understand my decision, though it is difficult. Proceed with caution and, if necessary, seek help from the authorities. I knew you were the only person I could trust to face this with courage and integrity." Emma finished reading with a tumultuous mind. Her father's words shed new light on John's situation and the true reason behind his illness. She slowly folded the letter, feeling the weight of the revelations. Confusion and betrayal mixed with a growing determination to understand the truth and face whatever was necessary to resolve the situation her father had left for her. Emma was sitting beside John's bed, the room bathed in a soft twilight, illuminated only by the faint light of the night filtering through the windows. The atmosphere was heavy with the scent of medication and the tense silence between them. John, lying in an uncomfortable position, looked even paler under the dim light. He turned his head slowly to look at Emma, his once bright eyes now filled with pain and regret. "Emma," he began, his voice weak and tired, "there's something I need to tell you." Emma leaned closer, gently holding John's hand. "What is it, John? You can tell me anything." John made a visible effort to speak, his breath heavy and ragged. "I was involved in something terrible. A scheme to embezzle money from your family. I was drawn into it, and at first, I didn't realize the gravity. But soon I saw what was happening and tried to get out." Emma felt a pang in her chest, struggling to absorb what she was hearing. "Embezzling money? John, how could you?" John closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to find the right words. "I know it was a grave mistake. At first, I was desperate, and they deceived me. I thought I could escape and fix it, but things got increasingly complicated. When I tried to leave, I realized I had betrayed dangerous people." Emma looked at him, confusion mixed with anger. "So, is that why you're so ill? My father's letter mentioned something about an illegal scheme but didn't explain the details." John opened his eyes and looked directly at Emma, his face a mask of pain and guilt. "Yes, the illness. It's a result of slow poisoning. Those I betrayed didn't take kindly to my attempt to leave. I started feeling the effects of the poison months ago, and I couldn't escape anymore." She shook her head, struggling against tears. "So, you're saying all this was caused by those people?" John nodded, his expression deeply remorseful. "Yes, they didn't want to leave any trace. They were determined to make sure no one knew what really happened. I tried to hide it, but I couldn't." Emma looked at him, her heart breaking from the revelation. "Why didn't you tell me before? Why didn't you ask for help?" John tried to reach out to Emma's hand, but he was too weak. "I was afraid, Emma. Afraid of involving you and putting you in danger. I thought I could handle it on my own. But I was wrong. I'm so sorry for everything." She held his hand more tightly, feeling his anguish and regret. "You can still try to make things right, John. We need to find a way to face this." John closed his eyes again, a look of resignation on his face. "I know, but it's too late for me now. I just hope you can find a solution and stay safe. I don't want you to carry this guilt." Emma wiped away the tears streaming down her face and tried to find strength amidst the pain. "We'll face this together, John. Now that I know the truth, I'll do whatever it takes to resolve this situation." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the hallway, and Emma braced herself for what was to come next, her heart heavy with the newly discovered responsibility and the determination to correct the accumulated wrongs. Emma was sitting by John's bed, her eyes red and tired, the pain and betrayal still fresh in her mind. The room around her seemed to reflect her emotional state. It was silent except for the soft sound of John's breathing and the occasional rustle of the wind outside. She looked at John, who was weaker than ever, and felt a wave of sadness and compassion. His words still echoed in her mind, revealing not only the depth of his mistake but also the extent of his suffering. It was impossible to ignore the fact that, despite his grave errors, John was clearly remorseful and in great danger. With a deep sigh, Emma took John's hand in hers, squeezing it firmly. "I know it was a serious mistake, John," she said, her voice trembling, "and that you did terrible things. But seeing you like this, so fragile and remorseful, makes me understand that despite everything, you've suffered a lot too." John slowly lifted his head, his eyes filled with gratitude and a hint of surprise. "Emma, I don't deserve your forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable." She shook her head, tears threatening to fall again. "We all make mistakes, John. What matters now is what we do to make things right. What happened was awful, but your remorse and the truth you've told me change everything." He tried to smile, but the effort seemed painful. "I was afraid to involve you. I didn't want you to go through this." Emma wiped the tears from her eyes and took a deep breath. "I'm not going to let you face this alone. We need to work together to deal with the people behind this. They are the true culprits behind your situation and the corruption." John looked at her with a mix of hope and relief. "Do you think you can do it?" Emma nodded, her determination growing with each word. "Yes, I will find a way. Let's plan what we need to do to expose these people and ensure the truth comes out." She got up and began searching through papers and documents that might help. "I need all the information you have about the scheme and those involved. The more I know, the easier it will be to confront this." John made an effort to settle more comfortably in bed and began to speak with difficulty about the details of the scheme and the people involved. He tried to explain names, places, and events that had led to his situation. Emma listened attentively, jotting down everything she could. As they spoke, the guilt and betrayal Emma felt began to transform into a firm determination. She knew that confronting the corruption and those responsible for the poisoning would be a difficult and dangerous task, but her desire for justice and to protect John motivated her. She finished noting the information and looked at John, who was exhausted but relieved to finally share the truth. "We'll work on this, John. You've given me the information I need to start addressing this. Let's make sure no one else goes through what you've been through." Emma's commitment was clear. She knew the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but she was ready to face them with courage and determination, standing by John's side to right the wrongs of the past and seek the justice they both needed. With the support of local detective Mike Reynolds, Emma and John dedicated themselves to gathering evidence against those responsible for the fraud and poisoning. Mike, a middle-aged man with a serious and experienced demeanor, proved to be extremely efficient and committed. His eyes, always alert and analytical, scanned each document and lead with precision. "Let's start from where it all began," Mike said, gathering all the papers and records that Emma and John had collected. He examined the evidence carefully, the yellowed papers and scribbled notes with unwavering clarity. "I need all the material you have. Every detail could be crucial." Emma and John handed over the documents, while Mike meticulously reviewed each one. Emma, watching the process, felt a mix of hope and anxiety. She and John spent hours reviewing the documents, discussing what they knew and what they still needed to find out. Over the weeks, Mike began to piece together a clearer picture of the fraudulent scheme. He traced suspicious transactions, interviewed involved parties, and started to connect the dots between the accomplices. During this period, Emma and John worked tirelessly alongside him, providing any additional information they could recall. Finally, the hard work paid off. Mike managed to gather enough evidence to take the case to the authorities. With the evidence in hand, several search warrants and arrests were carried out. Justice was served as those responsible were brought to court and the corrupt scheme was dismantled. As the legal process moved forward, John, with the aid of appropriate treatments, began to show signs of recovery. His health, once deteriorated, started to improve gradually. Emma was by his side every step of the way, holding his hand with affection and encouragement. "I couldn't have done it without you, Emma," John said, his voice stronger and filled with gratitude. "You were amazing throughout all of this." Emma smiled, relieved to see John recovering. "We did this together. It was a tough road, but it was worth it. Now, we need to think about the future." With a sense of justice served and a new beginning in sight, Emma and John made an important decision. They decided to leave Stowe behind, where the memories and pains of the past were still very present. "Let's start over, John," Emma suggested. "Somewhere away from here, where we can build a new chapter for ourselves." John agreed with a smile, his gaze filled with hope and determination. Yes, let's find a place where we can truly start anew. A place where we can focus on both of us and our new life. With that, they began planning their new journey. The decision to leave Stowe and start a new life symbolized closing a painful chapter and beginning a new one based on the trust and true love they had rediscovered amid the adversities. Emma sat on the porch of the country house in Montpelier, the afternoon sun painting the sky in golden and orange hues. The setting was serene, with the gentle rustling of tree leaves in the wind and birds singing in the background. She gazed at the horizon, lost in thought, as the recent past played in her mind like an old film. The past year had been an emotional roller coaster. Emma recalled the sleepless nights, the painful discoveries, and the relentless struggle to rectify what seemed like endless mistakes. She thought of every moment of anguish and every small step they took to overcome the adversities. Despite its difficulties, the journey had been transformative. She remembered the discovery of the fraudulent scheme and the revelation of John's betrayal. That harsh truth, which had hit her hard, also became a source of deep learning. The guilt and pain she felt were immense, but they also opened her eyes to an inner strength she hadn't known she possessed. I never imagined I would have to face something so devastating, Emma thought with a sigh. She also recalled the hours spent working with Mike Reynolds, the detective, and the constant collaboration with John to gather evidence and seek justice. Each challenge they faced together strengthened their bond and showed that, despite the mistakes and difficulties, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. We managed to overcome what seemed impossible, she reflected, a faint smile appearing on her lips. Most importantly, Emma realized how the love between her and John had transformed and strengthened through their trials. They faced pain and betrayal, but instead of drifting apart, they found a new depth in their relationship. The trust and affection that developed were the fruits of a shared journey, where each of them gave their best to face the adversities. True love can indeed withstand the greatest trials, she pondered. Emma also acknowledged that the hardest circumstances often reveal the deepest truths about oneself and others. The experiences that once seemed unbearable were now seen from a new perspective. She learned to value honesty, trust, and resilience even more, understanding that these qualities are essential for facing any challenge. With a sigh of relief and a sense of peace, Emma rose from her chair and looked at John, who was beside her, gazing at the same horizon. Their hearts were healed, and the future looked promising, full of possibilities and opportunities. They were ready to embrace whatever came next, confident that together they could face any challenge life might present.